राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम हरे राम राम हरे कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Ram Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
কৃষ্ণ বলরাম জয় কৃষ্ণ বলরাম, কৃষ্ণ বলরাম জয় কৃষ্ণ বলরাম। জয় গৌরনিতাই 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 জয় গৌরনিতাই। ললিতা বিশাখা জয় রাধে শ্যাম, ললিতা বিশাখা জয় রাধে শ্যাম। প্রভুপাদ 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 প্রভুপাদ। জয় জয় প্রভুপাদ 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 প্রভুপাদ। শ্রী গুরু চরণ পদ্ম কেবল ভকতে সদ্ম। শ্রী গুরু চরণ পদ্ম কেবল ভকতে সদ্ম। বন্দমোই সাবধান মতে, বন্দমোই সাবধান মতে। যাহার প্রসাদে ভাই এ ভবত রিয়া যায়। যাহার প্রসাদে ভাই এ ভবত রিয়া যায়। কৃষ্ণ প্রাপ্তে হয় যাহা হইতে, কৃষ্ণ প্রাপ্তে হয় যাহা হইতে। গুরু মুখ পদ্ম বাক্য চিত্তে রিয়ায়ক। গুরু মুখ পদ্ম বাক্য চিত্তে রিয়ায়ক। আর না করিহ মনে আশা, আর না করিহ মনে আশা। শ্রী গুরু চরণেরতে এই সেই উত্তম গতি। শ্রী গুরু চরণেরতে এই সেই উত্তম গতি। আজ প্রসাদে পুরে সর্ব আশা। যে প্রসাদে পুরে সর্ব আশা। চক্ষু দান দিল যেই জন্মে জন্মে প্রভু সেই। চক্ষু দান দিল যেই জন্মে জন্মে প্রভু সেই। দিব্য জ্ঞান হৃদয়ে প্রকাশিত। দিব্য জ্ঞান হৃদয়ে প্রকাশিত। প্রেম ভক্তি যাহা হইতে অবিদ্যা বিনাশ যাতে। প্রেম ভক্তি যাহা হইতে অবিদ্যা বিনাশ যাতে। বেদে গাই যাহার চরিত। বেদে গাই যাহার চরিত। শ্রী গুরু করুণা সিন্ধু অধম নার বন্ধু। শ্রী গুরু করুণা সিন্ধু অধম জনার বন্ধু। লোকনাথ লোকের জীবন। লোকনাথ লোকের জীবন। আহা প্রভু কর দয়া দেহ মোরে পদ ছায়া। আয়া প্রভু কর দয়া দেহ মোরে পদ ছায়া। এবে যাজ গোচক্রে ভুবন। এবে যাজ গোচক্রে ভুবন। প্রভু পাদ পতিত পাবন। তুয়া পদে লইনু শরণ। জয় প্রভু পদ প্রভু পদ প্রভু পদ জয় প্রভু পদ। জয় প্রভু পদ প্রভু পদ প্রভু পদ জয় প্রভু পদ। প্রভুপাদ 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 প্রভুপাদ। জয় জয় প্রভুপাদ 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 প্রভুপাদ। জয় জয় প্রভুপাদ 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 प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद गुरु पूजा के नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामीते नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी प्रचत्तो देश तारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद गौर भक्त वृंद गौर नित्यानंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु दया कर मोरे तुमा बिना के दयालु जगत संसारे पतित पावन हेतु तब अवतार मुसम पतित प्रभु ना पाइबे आरो आहा प्रभु नित्यानंद প্রেমানন্দ সুখে নিত্যানন্দ কৃপা বল কনা কর আমি বড় দুঃখে দয়া করো সীতাপতে অদ্বৈত গোসায়ে তব কৃপা বলে পাই চৈতন্য নিতায়ে আয়াহা স্বরূপ সনাতন রূপ রঘুনাথ ভট্ট যুগ শ্রীজীবহার প্রভু লোকনাথ দয়া করো শ্রী আচার্য প্রভু শ্রীনিবাস রামচন্দ্র সঙ্গ মাগে নরোত্তম দাস শ্রী কৃষ্ণ চৈতন্য প্রভু দয়া কর মোরে তন্ন প্রভু তোমা বিনা কে দয়ালু জগত সংসারে হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে 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 রাম 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 হরে 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 কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে 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 রাম 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 হরে 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 কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে 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 রাম 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 হরে হরে ও হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে 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 রাম 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 হরে 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 রাম হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে 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 রাম রাম হরে হরে জয় জয় প্রভুপাদ 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 প্রভুপাদ
हरे कृष्ण।
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna. I forgot. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaridhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaridhari. Yasodanandana Rajachana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Rajachana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaridhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaridhari. Yasodanandana Rajachana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Rajachana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Bihari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivraja Kacharcha Ashtotarata Srimad Abhay Charanarvindam Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Kori Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Vibhuti Stavakacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Nabadi Dham Ki Jai Ganga Maya Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Shrimati Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Shrimati Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai Samveda Bhaktivinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. We're reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, Chapter 1, entitled The Spiritual Masters, text number 47. You chant together, or yeah? Let me put my glasses on here. Shiksha Guru Keta Jani Krishna Rasrupa. Shiksha Guru Keta Jani Krishna Rasrupa. Antaryami Bhakta Shrestha Etui Rupa. Antaryami Bhakta Shrestha Etui Rupa. Shiksha Guru Keta Jani Krishna Swarupa. Antarjami Bhakta Shrestha Etui Rupa. Shiksha Guru Keta Jani Krishna Swarupa. Antarjami Bhakta Shrestha Etui Rupa. Ladies? Jani Krishna Swarupa. Antarjami Bhakta Shrestha Etui Rupa. Shiksha Guru Keta Jani Krishna Swarupa. Antarjami Bhakta Shrestha Shiksha Guru Ke, the spiritual master who instructs. Ta, indeed. Jani, I know. Krishna, of Krishna. Sarupa, the direct representative. Antarjami, the indwelling supersoul. Bhakta Shrestha, the best devotee. These. Dui, two. Rupa, forms. One should know the instructing spiritual master to be the personality of Krishna. Lord Krishna manifests himself as the supersoul and as the greatest devotee of the Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami states that the instructing spiritual master is a bona fide representative of Krishna. Sri Krishna himself teaches us as the instructing spiritual master from within and without. From within, he teaches us as Paramatma, our constant companion. And from within, he teaches from the Bhagavad-Gita as the instructing spiritual master. There are two kinds of instructing spiritual masters. One is the liberated person, fully absorbed in meditation in devotional service, and the other is he who invokes the disciple's spiritual consciousness by means of relevant instructions. Thus, the instructions in the science of devotion are differentiated in the terms of the objective and subjective ways of understanding. So, first of all, the Chaitanya Charitamrita is described as the postgraduate study of the science of Krishna consciousness. So first you learn the ABCs from Bhagavad-Gita, then you like you go to grade school, you learn, then if you do better, you can go to college. Right? If you don't understand ABCs, then how you'll go to college? Not possible. And then if you do well in college, you can go to postgraduate work, right? Get a master's degree, a PhD. Right? So that postgraduate work is this Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this particular chapter about the spiritual master is, a little complicated. It's not so easily understood. I think our movement is still struggling with trying to understand. Although Prabhupada explains everything very clearly, still it's a matter of realization. Like birds. A bird can fly as high as its capacity. Right? You have different kinds of birds. You have eagles, they can fly so high. In Bombay we have, I don't know here, they call them kikes. They can fly very high and they soar, they easily glide in the breezes. But crows, we have a lot of crows in Bombay too, they really have to struggle to get up in the air, and they can only go so high. They can't imagine to go as high. So in the same way, it depends upon our realization how we can understand these purports. As devotees, we should always be ready to learn and understand better. So here, the instructing spiritual master is being compared to Krishna himself. Krishna is the original spiritual master, and he wants to see that all his living entities come to the process of bhakti and come to their original position as to being his servitors. The reason that the living entity comes into the material world is because they no longer want to surrender. They want to independently try to become the master. Devotional service, instructions from Krishna that are in the Bhagavad-Gita are to bring the living entity back to the original position of being the servant of Krishna. So Krishna wants to help the living entity. He's very interested to see that his parts and parcels come back to him. We have a body, and it has various parts, right? You have 10 fingers, you have a little finger, what do they call it, the pinky? Right? A pinky?
Baby finger.
Huh?
The baby finger.
The baby finger, right? So if there's some problem in your baby finger, you don't think, Are chordo, what difference does it make? I have 9 more fingers. No. You think how to go to the doctor, get it rectified, get it working condition, is it not? In the same way, we're Krishna's parts. We're part and parcel of Krishna. So in the same way, when Krishna sees that we're not in proper condition, he's worried about it. He has concern. And therefore, he comes, he gives us his instructions in Bhagavad-Gita. Right? He manifests himself in his instructions. The Bhagavad-Gita is non-different from Krishna because it's his Vani, it's his instructions. And in the same way, he manifests himself as the instructing spiritual master. So the instructing spiritual master, he gives the instructions of Krishna. He doesn't manufacture anything. He doesn't try to invent something new. And we see that in the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. If you look in all of his lectures, he may be speaking from Bhagavatam or whatever, but he's focused on the Bhagavad-Gita. He's giving that instruction from the Gita, because that's the instructions of Krishna. This is the instructing spiritual master. When we first got this Chaitanya Charitamrita, the first thing that came out, published, was the 7th chapter. It was printed in a soft-bound copy called the 5 Features. The Lord in 5 Features. Remember that? Soft-bound. It was the 7th chapter of Adi Lila. It was about the Panchatattva. That was published first. And then the Adi Lila came out, and there was a big, like the Krishna book, same size as the Krishna book, and a yellow cover, and devotees were eagerly reading the various purports, and they came to this section about instructing spiritual master and initiating spiritual master, and they began to think, oh, the devotee that taught me how to do Sankirtan is my instructing spiritual master. They went to Srila Prabhupada and asked him. And he said, no, for you I am both. Which goes along with his purports, because he says that generally the instructing spiritual master, by giving that instruction, later on goes on to be the initiating spiritual master. So that certainly was the case for all of us with Srila Prabhupada. And even today, as resolved by the GBC, that Srila Prabhupada is the predominant Siksha Guru for all the members of ISKCON. Siksha Guru. So here Krishnadas Kaviraj is saying that Siksha Guru is the manifestation of Krishna. And in one of the earlier verses, which I thought was very important for us to understand, is that it gives Krishna pleasure to manifest himself as the spiritual master. He manifests himself as the Siksha Guru. He manifests himself as a Diksha Guru. Right? And he says that if you want to progress, then you have to take help from Guru. Guru is required. And that's in anything that you do in life, you require a teacher, isn't it? Sometimes devotees like to learn classical music. So what's required? Well, if you want to become good in classical music, first you should have some talent, right? Next you should have a teacher. And third, you have to practice. Right? So it's the same in spiritual life. We have the talent. What is the talent? The talent is that our innate, our original consciousness is Krishna consciousness. Simply it's become covered over. Like gold, Prabhupada said, that's covered by mud. The process of accepting the spiritual master and following his instructions uncovers the mud so that our original consciousness can be manifest. Now here's an interesting line, and one is, there's two kinds of instructing spiritual masters. One is a liberated person fully absorbed in meditation and devotional service. And the other is he who invokes the disciple's spiritual consciousness by means of relevant instructions. Well, we certainly saw in the life of Srila Prabhupada his effort to enlighten the devotees by spiritual instructions, by bringing them up through spiritual instructions. But at the same time, certainly Srila Prabhupada fit the other type, a liberated person fully absorbed in meditation and devotional service. Srila Prabhupada's meditation, as we heard yesterday from Shrutikirti Prabhu, was always about serving Lord Chaitanya's mission, serving the mission of his Guru Maharaj, regardless of his bodily condition. He had fever, but yet he came to give the address, right? Fully absorbed. Right? If we get a fever, even 100 and 101, we're out of order, right? Out of commission. Kam nahi hote. But just see, Srila Prabhupada, even though he had such a heavy fever, he came to preach. This is the liberated person fully absorbed. Srila Prabhupada talks that a sadhu means one who is, even though he's indisposed, if someone comes to meet him, still he'll meet him. This is sadhu. You'll never hear from sadhu that, oh, no, I won't, I'm sick today, I won't. No. Still he'll meet. And Srila Prabhupada exemplified that in his life. He was always ready to preach to someone. Whenever Srila Prabhupada was interviewed by reporters, it went beyond the level of him trying to give a story to the reporter. Rather, he was directly preaching to that reporter for his own benefit, for his own spiritual upliftment. So Krishna likes to manifest himself as the instructing spiritual master, as the initiating spiritual master, in his various forms, all to give pleasure to his conditioned living entities, the Baddha Jivas. The jiva is very small and is easily overcome by the powerful energy, material energy of Krishna. Our ability to overcome the material energy is very minimum. It's not possible for the minute living entity to overpower Krishna's powerful material energy. It's only possible by the mercy of Krishna. When Krishna so desires to give the mercy, then the living entity can overcome the material proclivities that we have. So what's the prerequisite? Why Krishna will give them mercy? And that is answered here in this chapter. When the living entity accepts the shelter of Krishna's manifestation as the spiritual master. When he takes up that in a serious way, to understand the instructions of the spiritual master and to follow those instructions, to apply them in his life, then Krishna will show mercy. Then one will be able to actually understand that, one, I'm not this body. I'm spirit soul. We'll be able to understand that the body is separate and the soul is separate. We'll be able to understand beyond that, as a spirit soul, what I'm supposed to do and what I'm not supposed to do. Actually, Krishna is always with us as a spiritual master in the form of Paramatma. He's our neighbor, right? As they say in Hindi, Hamara Bajuwala. Right? Our next door neighbor. He's always there. Right? But yet, we don't pay much attention to it. Right? We have our own things going on. It used to be that neighbors were friendly. But in Bombay today, you can have somebody living right next door and not know their name or who they are or what they do or anything about them. That's the nature of Kali Yuga. But Krishna is there. Just imagine, you're sharing an apartment with someone. You live in the same apartment, but you don't talk to each other. You don't interact. You come and you go. What kind of, relationship is that? But that's what we've chosen. Krishna's with us, where He's in our hearts, like the two birds in the tree, the two parrots in the tree. But somehow or another we've chosen to ignore that the closest person to us, and we've chosen to find someone else to be close to. Nobody can be as close as Krishna, right? But yet we're looking for somebody else to be close to. So that's our tendency. But that tendency can be dovetailed in the service of Krishna also. If we choose to look for devotees to be close to, then that's okay. That will help us progress in spiritual life. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came in the form of a devotee. He's none other than Krishna himself, the Supreme Lord. In other incarnations, he performed his activities of protecting the devotees and chastising the demons. The Duskritam, chastising the demons. But in this particular incarnation, he was just, as a devotee, giving the example how to develop love for Krishna, how to be a devotee of Krishna. So, in this Kali Yuga, to claim that I'm a devotee of Krishna and I'm worshipping Krishna, right? But I have nothing to do with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's a illusionary conception of life. Right? It's a madness. Right? No one can worship Krishna without surrendering at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj has so nicely given us this Chaitanya Charitamrita so that we can understand Chaitanya Mahaprabhu nicely. I'll continue reading. The Acharyas, in the true sense, let me put my eyes back on here. The Acharya, in the true sense of the term, who is authorized to deliver Krishna, enriches the disciple with full spiritual knowledge and thus awakens him to the activities of devotional service. So this really nicely describes what Srila Prabhupada did, right? Certainly he was authorized by Krishna, and due to his intense desire to serve Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his spiritual master, persons that weren't even qualified to take to devotional service, right? They didn't have sufficient punya to take to devotional service, right? But yet Krishna, from within the heart, enlightened them to do devotional service. So the Acharya, he sees that spark of interest and expertly fans that spark so that it increases more and more into a fire of a desire to perform activities of devotional service. When by learning from the self-realized spiritual master, one actually engages himself in the service of Lord Vishnu, functional devotional service begins. When by learning from the self-realized spiritual master, one actually engages himself in the service of Lord Vishnu, functional devotional service actually begins. So one may be chanting Hare Krishna, and that's certainly good, but when one surrenders to the spiritual master and takes up the different activities of devotional service, then one's devotional service begins. Arjuna realized that. Arjuna was on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He was in confusion. He was speaking so many things to Krishna about why he shouldn't engage in his duty. And he thought himself being talking from Shastra. But then he realized that his confusion would not be solved unless he surrendered. So he gave up being a friend of Krishna, and he said, "Now Krishna, I surrender unto you. You guide me. I become your disciple." Unless one has that, unless we have that mentality that we are going to accept the instructions, right? No, we won't be able to do devotional service. Srila Prabhupada says if your glass is full, already full, what will he put in it? Right? If you know everything, then what he'll put in there? Being disciple means the glass is empty. I'm ready to take, to understand, and to follow your instructions. Don't sit like that. Nectar Devotion says not to hold your knees in front of the deities. So how one can perform devotional service has to be gotten from the spiritual master. And then devotional service begins. The procedures of this devotional service are known as abhideya, or actions one is duty-bound to perform. Our only shelter is the Supreme Lord, and one who teaches us how to approach Krishna is the functioning form of the personality of Godhead. There is no difference between the shelter-giving Supreme Lord and the initiating and instructing spiritual masters. If one foolishly discriminates between them, he commits an offense in the discharge of devotional service. The spiritual master is known as Ashraya Vigraha, or the shelter, the form of the shelter that one can get protection from. Protection from the material consciousness that we've cultivated over so many lifetimes. Material consciousness. So when we take shelter from the Ashraya Vigraha, from the spiritual master, we become protected from our conditioning. We overcome our conditioning by first of all establishing our relationship with Krishna, Sambandha. The deity in Vrindavan is Madan Mohan, Srila Sanatana Goswami's deity, that gives that relationship. That's the first thing. That's why Srila Prabhupada, he's explaining the glories of Krishna. He's explaining how Krishna is great, so that we will want to have that relationship with Krishna. Everyone is aspiring to have a relationship with a great person. Right? If someone gets an opportunity in Bombay to meet Amitabh Bachchan, oh, they'll be very happy. Right? And to say that Amitabh Bachchan mere dost hai. Right? Someone great. So there's no one greater than Krishna. But we've forgotten that. And the spiritual master gives us Sambandha Gyan. He explains how Krishna is great. By hearing regularly how Krishna is great, we understand our position, which is how insignificant we are. Our conditioning is, I'm great. I'm fit to be served. That's why people like to go to restaurants, right? They get nice service. They don't have to do the pots. Maybe you cooked a good meal, but at the end of the meal, there's all the pots, right? The plates, everything is waiting for you. Right? But if you go to the restaurant, kaya gaya. We're the servant of Krishna, but mistakenly, over so many different lifetimes, we've imagined that I'm the master. I'm the master. Like every man, he thinks, and I'm going to get married, I'm going to get a nice wife, and then, she'll do what I say. Right? That lasts about how long? Till just about after the marriage is over? Then, in practical life, we know. Right? If you don't do what the wife says, you're in trouble. There's a story. There was a king. And he had so many ministers. One of his ministers, Birbal, told him, "Are all your ministers, they're all do whatever their wife says." And the king says, "I don't believe that." He said, "Okay, you just ask them." So he told his ministers, "All of you who do whatever your wife says, come on my left side." So one by one, all the ministers came to his left side, except for one. He came to the right side. So he told Birbal, "You see, at least I have one minister." And then he said, "Okay, ask him." He said, "How you came to my right side?" He said, "Because when I was leaving the house this morning, my wife told me not to stand in a crowd." So the reality of life is something different, very much different. Therefore, we have to change our conditioning, change our consciousness to understand that I am not the master. Yes, I'm the servant of Krishna. And the spiritual master tries to establish that in his Sambandha Gyan, giving the greatness of Krishna. Then that goes on to what's being described here as Abhideha. Abhideha, the spiritual master gives details about how to perform devotional service. And there's so many details that you learn, just like in deity worship, right? How the deity is to be served, there's a process for it. Cleanliness, Prabhupada said, and punctuality are the two most important things in deity worship. The cloth that you go into the deity room with has to be clean, right? Our hands should be clean. A pujari spends so much time washing the hands, right? Keeping them clean. And every detail is there, and the spiritual master gives all those details. Right? They're not for no reason. कुछ फालतू काम नहीं है. So that we understand what is our position and what is the position of Krishna. The practical, Abhideya. And Govindaji is the deity of this, intensifying our devotional service, doing more devotional service. We heard again yesterday from Shruti Kirti how Srila Prabhupada, he would rise, in the night and start translating after just a few hours of sleep, conquering over these eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Right? This is Abhideha. Govindaji is the deity in charge of that. Srila Sanatana Goswami is the ideal spiritual master, for he delivers one the shelter of the lotus feet of Madan Mohan. Even though one may be unable to travel on the field of Vrindavan due to forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can get an adequate opportunity to stay in Vrindavan and derive all spiritual benefits by the mercy of Sanatana Goswami. Sri Govindaji acts exactly like the Siksha Guru, instructing spiritual master by teaching Arjuna the Bhagavad-Gita. He is the original preceptor, for he gives us instructions and an opportunity to serve him. The initiating spiritual master is a personal manifestation of Srila Madan Mohan Vigraha, whereas the instructing spiritual master is a personal representative of Srila Govindadev Vigraha. Both of these deities are worshipped at Vrindavan. Srila Gopinath is the ultimate attraction in spiritual realization. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So if anybody has any questions, we can try to answer them, or discussions.
So sometimes someone would say, well, Prabhupada, my initiating, instructing spiritual master, and somebody else is not my instructing spiritual master, so I only have to listen to them. I only listen to Prabhupada. So how do we find that fine line between surrender to the Guru, the instructing spiritual master, and also taking further guidance from your superiors or authorities, or however the chain structure works, wherever you're being sheltered?
Well, didn't Srila Prabhupada tell us to daily go to the Bhagavatam class? Right? So, if you're not going to take instructions in the Bhagavatam class, what are you going to do there? Sleep? Right? Just common sense. Srila Prabhupada, even Chanakya Pandit says, you take gold from a filthy place, you take instructions even from a fool. Right? So I may be fool number one, but if I'm giving the message that comes from Krishna in the form of the Bhagavad Gita, the original instructing spiritual master, Govindaji, right? So you should not take that. Right? You got your own idea? No. We should listen to other devotees, because without association with devotees, you can't make any spiritual advancement. Can't go anywhere in spiritual life. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada formed the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, so there would be opportunity for people to associate with devotees. We need devotees, right? That should be our mood, that we need the devotees. Therefore, we're very careful in dealing with the devotees, because we need them. Just like a boss in the factory, he's careful because without his workers, he can't get his goods produced or sold. Right? So he takes care of the workers. In the same way, we need the devotees to engage in devotional service. Do you think that all alone any one person can do all the sevas for Krishna Balaram and Radha Shyam Sundar and Gaur Nitai? No. It takes a team. It's a team effort. And this is the Vrindavan Yatra. What does it mean, Yatra? Yatra means we're all on the journey together. We're trying to complete the journey together. And that's the only way we'll be able to complete it. And that pleases Krishna Balaram. It pleases Radha Shyam Sundar when he sees the devotees are working together. That pleases him more than anything. You may do all the 64 upachars, but if you don't have the mood of working cooperatively with the devotees, listening to the temple president and performing the activities, Krishna is not pleased. What Krishna needs your, puris and your halava, right? You think Krishna needs your puris and halava? Prabhupada said. Radharani's cooking farm, whatever she cooks, is sweet as nectar, and she never does the same prep twice. But still, he will accept your puris. He'll accept your halava. He'll accept your sabji. On one strength, that is our commitment to surrender to Srila Prabhupada, who has requested him. When he was leaving Australia, after the installation of the Radha Krishna deities, he prayed to Krishna. He said, "My dear Lord, now you please teach them how to serve you, and you accept their service." So the Archa Vigraha is accepting our service by the request of Srila Prabhupada. But he'll only accept that service if we cooperate together. We had that mood of working together and helping each other in devotional service.
But suppressing someone's individuality and creativity, they may have some idea of how to serve Krishna and be inspired by it, but due to your maybe managerial and or fixed policies so that we don't have the broad-mindedness to allow them to express their individual service mood and attitude and grow on that.
Yeah. Well, the spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada could understand very minutely the moods and the personality of his disciples, and he very expertly engaged them according to their talents. One devotee with painting, and here in Vrindavan we had an example of that. Two completely different instructions. Hansaduta was here, and he had a traveling party, mostly German devotees. And they had a bus, a big German bus that they drove all the way across from Germany. And he was traveling in South India and doing preaching programs. But he landed up here in Vrindavan. And in Vrindavan he was kind of pushing his weight around. You should do like this, you should do this, you should do that. And the devotees were getting a little, they were in anxiety actually. So Srila Prabhupada was preaching to him, your motto should be like in the railways. Keep the wheels turning. Keep your party always traveling and preaching. And Akshayananda, who was the temple president, he always wanted to go out traveling. But it wasn't possible because there's so many things that he had to do as a temple president. But he was always looking for that opportunity to go out traveling. And so after Srila Prabhupada instructed Hansaduta to keep the wheels turning, he turned to Akshayananda and he said, "And you, don't go anywhere, always stay in Vrindavan." So according to what the devotee needed, Srila Prabhupada, and what the need of Krishna was, we needed, in those early days, there weren't many devotees. There were no Indian devotees, right? Daivi Shakti Mataji? No. Very few. All foreigners. And the Americans had a tough time trying to extend their visas. It wasn't like today.
It's still like that.
It's still like that, yeah. Tough time. But the British devotees, because they were Commonwealth, part of the Commonwealth, they didn't need a visa. So devotees like Smarahari and Padmalochan, Puridas, they could stay in India without so much problem. But because there were very few devotees, Srila Prabhupada was always concerned. He wanted to have, as the government give facility to the devotees so that they could stay. He needed devotees to do so many services and do the preaching and take care of the temples. And then gradually, some of the Indian became devotees, and now there's lots of devotees. There's so many devotees in India, they go to the West and do service. Yes. You got a mic for the back? Pass the mic. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Sometimes you have to come closer, maybe. I think you're too far away from here, too far from home base.
Yeah.
Instructing spiritual masters that don't probably
Come a little closer, come closer. Sorry.
Get your sound system together.
That's my man here on the chest.
specifically, rather than beat around the bush, when Prabhupada gave Srimad Bhagavatam class, nobody would dare to chant their rounds during Bhagavatam class. They would listen very attentively. And as the spiritual master has instructed his followers to chant japa during Srimad Bhagavatam class. Now, Srila Prabhupada told us that Srimad Bhagavatam class is the same as Kirtan. So how to help these devotees who chant japa during Bhagavatam class to understand Prabhupada's instructions come before the instructions of their so-called instructing spiritual master?
Glad you're in the seat.
Nobody's a spiritual master if they don't follow the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. If they deviate 1 millimeter, right, something smaller than a millimeter, whatever it is, they're not fit to be followed. It's that simple. It's not subjective. You know, they talked about objective and subjective. Prabhupada's instructions are it. There's no room to wiggle. If he says, you got to come to Mangal Arati, you got to come. And no one can say, well, you can come sometimes, or you can, no, you got to come. Prabhupada says 16 rounds. Nobody can, in the name of being a spiritual master, reduce it to 4. You can't do that. Simple as that. Our standard is what Srila Prabhupada has given us, and it begins there and it ends there. Now there may be details that someone, a instructing spiritual master can give according to time, place, and circumstance. But the basis of all those instructions has to be Srila Prabhupada's instructions. And if Srila Prabhupada would not allow us, and he certainly didn't, to chant our rounds during the Bhagavatam class, nobody can go against that.
That's from the BBC.
Well, I don't know who it's from, but hopefully it's from Prabhupada. Any other questions? Okay, one in the back there.
Prabhu, thank you so much. Your guide is very specific and very encouraging. So I have one question regarding to the flowing of your lecture. Sometimes, of course, we are nothing. Absolutely, we are nothing. But sometimes there's this tendency to always put the touch bite on ourselves. So what would be your practical guide on how to always take the touch bite away from ourselves?
Well, the first thing is to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And then the second thing is to, wherever you go, whoever you meet, tell them about Krishna. And your focus will be away from our own identity and focused on Krishna's identity as being very great. And in that way, we'll come to understand our position in front of Krishna as being something very insignificant.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for the wonderful class. I have a question in regards to following the instruction of the spiritual master and also Srila Prabhupada, the foundation that Srila Prabhupada has left down in his books. Now, we do know from my own understanding of certain things from what I've seen is that most often we listen or we decide to follow a certain instruction based on our mental understanding, our mind, how our emotion is towards what is being said to us, and not based on intelligence. Now, most often because we follow things based on our emotion, not based on intelligence, there's always this conflicting points that is there for us to always be stable in either the instruction of the spiritual master or what every instruction that has been left in Srila Prabhupada's book. And because we want to understand what has been left in Srila Prabhupada's book, we listen to what the spiritual master is saying. And most often, when we listen to what the spiritual master is saying, we just accept it based on our emotion, not based on the intelligence. Now, how do we bridge this? Like, what is the balancing point for us to bridge this emotion? Listening and hearing emotionally, and listening and hearing with intelligence. Thank you, brother.
Well, the spiritual master always has to take into account the psycho-physical nature of the disciple and how to engage them best. So there's some subjectivity to that, I joined this movement with a very good friend. We went to kindergarten together, first grade, second grade, and we also became devotees. After I was in the movement just for a short time, I was going out on book distribution, right? Now, realize I've known this person since we were 5 years old, and now we're 22, we're both devotees. So I was preaching to him, you ought to come out on book distribution. Well, he didn't say anything to me, but the next day the temple president came up to me and said, hey, listen, if you keep preaching to Bhakta Jim like that, he says he's going to bloop. So that was his mentality. And although we had known each other forever, practically speaking, I was out on book distribution enjoying it, and his mentality was he didn't want to go out at all, whether otherwise he would bloop. And he later went on to be a really accomplished preacher. At one point he was giving more lectures in St. Louis University than even a professor was giving in St. Louis University. So everyone has their different talents, and the spiritual master, he has to be subjective to understand what's best for this person. But then there are some objective instructions that come to us, which is beyond our, ability to, it's not something that I feel or I think. It's just, objectively an instruction that everybody has to follow. And so we have to balance those two things. Is that okay?
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Any other comments or questions? Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Oh my goodness.